So glad you are all here, the Brene Brown Book Club. I am excited to talk about a really slippery but important subject that Brene Brown talks about in many of her books, the idea of connection. It's really the focus of her entire work in Atlas of the Heart, most importantly, her recent book, and just how we all yearn for meaningful connection and want more of it, especially in our families. And so I am delighted to be here with you today with Torie Henderson, who is a life coach and has the amazing podcast, Supermom's Getting Tired. And I am just going to take it over to Torie, and then we'll just get right into the depth of what is connection and what blocks it, and some stories from our own lives. So, Torie.
Yes. So, like you said, I'm a life coach for super moms, as I call it. Not moms who think they're super, but moms who just try really, really hard and get overwhelmed, exhausted, resentful, burned out, those kind of things. And so, how I came into this work was I grew up, I loved kids my whole life. Everything I'd ever done was with children. Thought, okay, classroom teaching, that's the natural progression there. And, uh, that was hard, but I got to be around a lot of kids. But when I became a mom myself, I felt like it was too much of the same thing and too much energy going out. And so I quit teaching and I started doing parent education. And so I would read a parenting book since I was obsessed with them anyways. And then I would go teach it to a room full of parents. And what I realized was that the more parenting books I read, I acquired knowledge and information, but I would always feel shitty about myself. Like every time I would read a parenting book, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing it right. I should be better than I am. If I was a good mom, I would be doing it this way. And so for me, Brene's work was super powerful because it was putting words to something that I'd been experiencing, which was shame. And shame can only live in the dark. So as soon as you start talking about it, then it has a harder time staying alive, and I'd go to my husband and I'd be like, I'm a terrible mother because of this. And he's like, really? Like, are you? Like, let's look at the whole other 100 things you did today, and that one thing, does that really tip the scale into terrible parenting? And he just helped me put it into perspective. And so I it was helpful, but happened, I ended up finding life coaching, and that really made the whole circle for me, where I could take in intellectual information without turning it into beating myself up for not being a perfect parent. And so and I started helping clients and working one-on-one. And so now I work with moms, primarily dads too, but to help them build connections with their preteens and teens. Right around when puberty starts, for some kids start to pull away from their mama, saying like, oh, I'm independent now, I don't need you so much, right? It's developmentally normal, and yet it can hurt like a dagger to the heart sometimes when moms have devoted so much love, time, and attention to raising their kids, and they want to feel connected, and they don't understand, how can I feel connected with my kids when they're rejecting me at every turn? And so this topic today of how to feel connected with your loved ones is certainly something I spent a lot of time with, helping connect with kids, but also spouses and parents and siblings and friends and neighbors, right? Like, how do I feel this connection with them that I want to feel?
Yeah. And for me, the most important part is we all want connection. So why isn't easier? What blocks us? So that's the part that really is juicy for me in my work. And I principally work with families with really hard family dynamics and
Hmm.
strong-willed kids. And that's where there's just a lot of power struggles. And it can be with our own parents, it can be with lots of different things, but just where does connection break down? So I just wanted to start with this amazing concept that Brene Brown has, that Torie, you brought up, about what is the near enemy and the far enemy. And this comes from her Atlas of the Heart book. And what of connection. So we all yearn for meaningful connection. So the far enemy is disconnection. And that makes sense. And she talks about it in that pod clip I put in
Mhm.
the post. And but the one that's slippery, that's tricky, is the near enemy, which is control. And so this, I think we all are really familiar with, but I think we get stuck, and it's a little elusive because we don't think of us helping or us, our bids for connection as actually being controlling. So, Torie, how has this lived in your life and your coaching?
Oh, well, me and control go way back.
Me too.
Right? So when you spend a lot of time trying not to feel ashamed, you want to feel worthy, you don't want to feel embarrassed or like not good enough, then control is kind of a natural thing. And so, like, let's take your kids, for example. I love my kids so much. I feel deeply connected to them, so connected that if they wear that outfit when they walk out the door, I'm going to feel embarrassed, right? I'm going to imagine that people are think that, my kid is like a homeless person or whatever, like
They're gonna
that
judge
we
you.
can't afford clothes, or I'm going to be judged. Like, how could I let my kid walk out of the house looking that way or acting that way or whatever? And so it's this, the control comes out of like, I need you to look a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way so that I can feel good. Right. So my, for example, so you're on my podcast talking about strong-willed children. So my daughter came out of the womb with a scowl on her face and like with a very determined will. She's not a natural, like, sunny disposition. Well, I am a total people pleaser. And I think the only way for me to feel worthy and good enough is for people to like me. So I spent a lot of my energy up until I had my daughter figuring out the right way to walk and talk and act so that people would like me. And then God gives me this gift of this girl who couldn't care less. So every day, she's as a baby, we'd go to the supermarket and someone like, oh, aren't you just a cute little thing? And she would just like scowl at them, and my whole insides would cringe. I'm like, I'm not a good mother because so it just gets so intertwined. So it's the enmeshment that causes the control of like, you are a reflection of me. I need you to, let's say you come to me and you're like, I had a bad day, everything went wrong. Well, then I have to feel uncomfortable because I love you, I care about you, I want you to be happy. And now all of a sudden I'm feeling all upset inside, and I don't want to feel upset inside. And so I need you to feel better so that I can feel better. So that's why Renee says that this first step to connection is to connect with yourself. Because if I'm 100%, if I'm connected to you, then I need to control you and make you change how you feel in order for me to feel how I want to feel.
Yeah, that
So
is so well said, and brings me to thinking about my own relationship with my partner, because he was culturalized by his mom to always be appropriate. And so his whole thing of how you feel safe, how you feel worthy, is to look right and act right and be right. And
mm,
and so he is constantly wanting to control me and our children because that's where he feels worthy and safe. That's his internalized message from attachment way, way, way back. And and so that controlling message, just, it's so elusive because it's subconscious. I don't think he even knows he's doing it. And then I came from a message from my parents of just, oh, do not care how you look, or that is selfish, and that is just way too focused inward. And, or, if your appearance, and your
yeah,
appearance shouldn't matter, it should
ego
be
kind
the
of, yeah.
values. Yes, yes, exactly. So you can see how, I love that you said enmeshment, how these topics just get so intertwined. When we think we're being good parents, we're trying to protect them unconsciously from being judged, but it's really ourselves that are uncomfortable. And so, like you said, we need to go to U-turn, go to ourselves first every time we feel upset. instead of going outward of, oh, they need to change so that I feel okay. It's no, oh, what's going on for me? What is this bringing up for me? What am I avoiding feeling? Embarrassment, fear of judgment, like you said.
Right. Right. And if you can give yourself some space and allow that feeling to be there, where you can process the embarrassment or the shame or the um, just the
Subconscious.
discomfort,
Yeah.
fear a lot of time. Like, I don't want to think the way you're thinking because that's going to make me feel scared. And so, but if you can just recognize, like, oh, I'm feeling scared, let me breathe and allow this feeling to be there that just got triggered, then we can be present. I think of it as like, let's say you've got a friend who's going through chemo, diagnosed with cancer, and you want to feel connected with them. You want to let them know, I'm here for you, right? And so, but very often, this attempt to like be loving and supportive is a tricky one for people to navigate. So I think of it as like, let's say you've got a friend who's going to fall down a well. They're not happy. They're not doing well. So we tend to do one of two things to help them try to feel better, right? We either fall down the well with them, and now we're suffering at the bottom of the well. We're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, I feel awful. Like, I don't know what to do. This is scary. And we don't like that. We don't like feeling like we're suffering along with somebody, right? That doesn't feel good. It kind of makes them feel a little bit better because there's a little solidarity, but it makes you feel worse. So then the other thing we do to try to make them feel better is we stand on top of the well and we tell them what they need to do to get out. We're like, okay, well, here's what you need to do. You just need to like shimmy up the sides and, hoist
Problem
yourself
solve.
up. And here's a book about, positive affirmations. And here's a story about somebody who cured themselves with cancer from this clinic in Germany, and we tell them what to do, and that kind of makes us feel a little bit better because, like, hey, I can solve your problems. I don't have to fall down the well with you. But it makes them feel worse because it's not our problem to solve, right? Like, they're
And,
at the bottom of the
and it doesn't meet their emotions.
well.
And
It does not meet
that's
their
where they
emotions.
really need support, is letting them feel what they're feeling instead of taking it away, taking them out of it. They're not broken. They
Yeah.
just need to feel.
And wasn't Renee talk about the near enemy of compassion is pity? Right. So
Yeah.
if you stand on the ground, you're like, oh, you poor thing, that looks terrible. Ew, I'm sure wouldn't want to be like that, doesn't feel good either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of how can I sit above the ground, even when people are falling down wells all around me? Maybe you got a grumpy teenager who's mad at the world, and you got a, mom who's just had knee replacement surgery. You might be surrounded by people who've fallen down wells. Okay. How can I sit above the ground, be at peace, remind them of what this looks like? Oh, it's a beautiful day up here. The sun is shining, the sky is blue. You can exude that sunshine and that warmth and loveliness while sitting right there and acknowledging, like, yeah, I see you're down the well. Like, that looks difficult. I'm
Yeah.
here for you. How can I help? Can
Yeah.
I throw you a rope? Whatever. You tell me.
And I love
Uh,
what Brene says. What does help look like? What does support look like for you? Because I know for me, I'm the same as you. I resonate so much with that I am such a sunny, I always want to look on the bright side. And I want to be this buoyant, sort of positive thing. And what I need support doing is feeling the dark emotion, is not rushing to distraction or rushing to problem solving, which is my sort of armor, but instead to be able to just sit and stay with, I'm uncomfortable, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I'm in the well. And just like you said, with from the top, just time and space to allow them to feel what they're feeling and let me feel what I'm feeling, because it's so many 30 years of conditioning to avoid feeling at all. I've got so much
yeah.
armor.
But I
So
really feel like like, I love that you said, like, I need help doing that. Just my suggestion is to not do it with the person who's fallen down the well, right? Like, do it separately, do it with your coach,
Yeah.
do it on your own. Because I remember when I had breast cancer, my best friend was very worried about me. And I wasn't worried about me. I did my work. I was above the ground. But every time she'd call, she would be down the well. And I was like, I don't want to go down the well with you. Like, that does not, that's, I worked hard to get up here. Like, you go. So I didn't talk to her
Yeah.
while I was going through radiation and stuff, because it made it difficult for me to keep my energy where I wanted it to be.
Right. Because you had to
If you,
caretake her emotions
I
instead of,
totally had to caretake her.
yeah,
She wasn't creating space for me to be where I was, which wasn't down a well.
right.
So it is
Yeah.
this fine balance. And I think you do want to make sure, like, number one rule of how to connect with somebody is to connect with yourself first.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And the ways to do that is slow down, sense into your body. Brene talks about biology. What's going on in your body? Where are you tense? Is it your jaws, your shoulders? What's going on for you? Because that's the clearest signal that helps me get out of my head, my spin out,
Mm-hmm.
and back to what's going on here. How can I connect with myself and body wisdom? And then what am I feeling? And then what am I needing?
I would like to remind my clients, it only takes 90 seconds to feel a feeling. Your brain cannot hold on to it for longer than that. But you've got to give it your full attention for
Yeah.
90 seconds. So that's the hard part, right? And it helps to have somebody else hold your feet to the fire and be like, okay,
Yeah.
what does shame feel like? What does vulnerability feel like? For me, vulnerability feels like a very thin piece of Swiss cheese right in my solar plexus, right? For me, when I'm embarrassed, I could feel the heat rising. It gets warm, it gets my cheeks. It's very classic. Shame for me is like a little turtle crawling into shell. And so just to let yourself have that feeling for 90 seconds and pay attention to the color, the texture, the sound of it. Where is it moving? Really get a clear visual
Yeah.
of it. And then it will eventually dissipate. It's hard to do on your own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be
Oh
gracious
my
to
gosh, we could talk all day long, but I want to get to what are the three main things that block people from connection? And so much of it is how we've built our armors over our entire lives. Why don't you go with the first one and I'll take the second?
yourself. Okay. Actually, before we kind of started that, I want to talk
Yeah.
about how I one of the ways I like to help people build connection is I say, what would you need to do in order to connect with that tree that's outside your window? I want you to feel a connection to that tree. What would you need to do? And so if you were to feel connection to a tree, which people do, right? This is not unusual. I always wanted to be one of those people, like, I never connected with stuffed animals, you know? When I was little, like, I didn't have the blankie. And I was always curious, like, how do kids do that? How do they bond with an inanimate object, right? And now I teach that to people because it's a great place to start. Because when there's a human in the room with all their own thoughts and opinions, we get kerfuddled. So if you think, how do I connect with a tree? What would you say if you wanted to feel connection with a tree?
Gosh, I would either in my mind or physically just touch and imagine the bark, imagine how that tree smells, think of the complexity of the leaf structure or the branch structure. Yeah.
Yeah, you would give it some attention, tune into the details of it,
Yeah.
right? Give it some, like, time, and kind of suspend your own judgment
Yeah.
about who do I think I am connecting to a tree or whatever. And you're
Okay.
just paying attention, open, looking, using all your senses. You said your feel, the smell, your eyes, right? Sensory attunement. So if you wanted to connect to a dog, how would you do that?
Same way, just a lot of, yeah, just presence. I would get my presence so that I'd touch the fur. I would maybe make eye contact and yeah, I would just dogs give so much because they don't judge, they don't talk back, they don't fix us. They just have beautiful energy.
Well, here's what I notice about that actually, because yeah, but we have a dog and my husband does not like dogs. So what I have learned is that we put thoughts inside our dog's head.
Mm.
We imagine that the dog is thinking certain things. So I can look at my dog and be like, oh, you love me so much. You just can't be away from me. You have to follow me around, right? And my husband, because he doesn't like dogs, he imagines the dog is thinking these like threatening things or whatever of like, oh, I'll show you, I'm going to punish you by peeing on the rug, or, like I don't know. He puts different thoughts in the dog's head than I put in the dog's head.
Yeah.
So one way to build, so he feels disconnected from the dog and I feel connected because the thoughts I imagine they're thinking are warm and loving and connecting, right? So two ways we connect with humans is one, we pay attention. We pay attention to the details. We spend time and just kind of notice without judgment, without the story in our head about what's happening. Then the other thing is we put thoughts inside their head that make us feel connected. They love it when I call them. She lights up when I walk in the room. She's so glad to see me. He appreciates what I do for him. We put thoughts in other people's heads. So those are the two ways you can build connection. So I think it's simpler until because you get to humans and it gets a little complicated.
Yeah. We get more meshed.
And more expectations.
Yeah.
If you did love me, you would act this way. And this is what a good connection should look like. But when it's just you trying to connect with a tree or a dog or anything, then it's all on you. So that's why I like doing that exercise.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then as we wrap, because we just can't go on and on, even though I'd love to, is just the things that block connection. Yes. So if you're having trouble connecting with a family member, maybe it is because you're not paying enough attention. Maybe it is because your inner dialogue is all this negative stuff sort of projecting onto them, or you have all these expectations, some of the things that Torie just mentioned. These are things that, it's our armor that blocks us from being able to open our hearts and letting them be who they are and letting ourselves be who we are. So some of the blocks are that we fear losing connection. We fear whatever we're doing or whatever we say is gonna create something between us. And so we just
that's what happens when you're parenting teens, right? You feel the connection and you're like, no, I must hug you and love you now. And they're like, get away, back off.
Like you said, developmentally, that's their role in life right then, is to separate and to build independence. So yeah.
But so no wonder we feel that when someone has different political views than we have, there's a fear of losing connection. Like if you're going to drift off that direction, I'm going to lose that,
Yeah, exactly. And then the other one we thought of is just a fear of loneliness, that I will do everything. We become like that hustling for our worth. I will do whatever you need me to be because I am so scared of being alone. And so that's another big block to connection.
Yeah. It's really that shame of like, causing us to like, we want other people to like us, to make us feel safe, to make us feel welcome. And when you're growing and evolving, you want other people to come with you, or if you feel like they're drifting away, we get all scrambly and that near enemy of control kicks in.
Yeah, exactly.
Graspy, clingy, that's your sign. Attachment.
Yes, that's because love is free. But
yeah, so fear of losing connection, fear of loneliness, and then that third one is this fear of rejection, right? Yeah. And I was really thinking about this because my mom is so good at this. Like, she doesn't have the fear of rejection that I have. Like, she makes friends with all of her neighbors. She's constantly like bringing them fruit off of her tree. She's always like leaving stuff on their doorstep, and she never needs reciprocation. Where I'm always like, I'll make a gesture, but then I wait and I want it to be reciprocated before I know if it's safe to move forward again, because I'm afraid you're going to judge me, reject me. And so, to be open hearted and to say, I don't care if I'm calling you 10 times in a row and you haven't called me back. I love it when I talk to you and you seem to enjoy it. I don't need it to be equal. I think we grow up with this idea that it should always be equal. And I think it's because when it is equal, it's so magical and wonderful. When you met a best friend and you want to like talk every day and walk every day, and you fall in love and you have this spouse who feels the same, it's amazing. And so we're always kind of striving for that. But it is absolutely okay to feel a connection and give more and still have a healthy relationship.
Even when we're different, even when there's
One
not the
person can
reciprocal.
give more.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be reciprocated at an even thing. And
Yeah.
so the fear of rejection makes us think that it does. And
Yeah.
because it's great when it does, but you could have many wonderful connective relationships if you suspend the idea that it needs to be reciprocated
Yeah.
perfectly equally.
That's a great point. And again, that's sort of us controlling how a relationship is supposed to be instead of just, again, self connection so that we're open to allowing whatever it is. And that's where real relationship happens.
Yeah, I enjoy their company. I can invite them out to dinner every week, but I don't have to wait for them to invite me. It's just this, so we're societally programmed, I think, to think that's not okay,
Yeah.
but it helps you feel connected. And it's this fearless love, right? You're putting yourself out there, you're in the arena, you're willing to take a risk on love, and it's a little scary, you're daring greatly, and you might fall, but it's absolutely part of being just open-hearted and feeling it the way and building connections when you are taking
Yeah.
responsibility for it.
Well, again, we could talk all day, but I'd love you to tell our viewers how do they get to hold of you and how can they work with you if they're curious about learning more. And so if you could just
Yeah.
close
So
with
if
that.
your listeners are trying to connect with a teen who is trying to disconnect from their parent, they can go to leadingyourteen.com and they can take a look. I have a group class and a one-on-one coaching program to help parents kind of, how do you say, like
Connect.
stay connected with their teen while also respecting that developmental process and appreciating the independent adult that their teen's trying to become. Oh, and they can also go to the my podcast, Supermom is Getting Tired.
That's wonderful. And I do 5 steps to connect with your strong willed child. So there's a new moms group that's actually starting in October if you're curious and you have a strong willed child and are in a bunch of power struggles. So I know we all want to connect. And if you're feeling that your connection is coming out as control, Brene Brown has a wealth of information. And please share this with friends.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Allison.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Torie. I look forward to doing this again.